Hello guys, Dr. Shungu Mufawa here and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about the human ear using a past paper that was written by Matrix in November of 2023. It is Life Sciences Paper 1 and we're going to look at question 1.4. As you can see here guys, the question says, the diagram below represents the human ear, and we are provided with a diagram. And when provided with a diagram, we already know that the examiner is probably going to ask us to label these parts that are represented by these letters. And the examiner can also ask us for functions of these parts. However, the examiner can provide us with functions of parts and then ask us to provide the letters and the names of those parts that match with the provided functions. So now, before we dive into this question, let us study the diagram. And we study the diagram by labeling the diagram. All right, so we're going to label the diagram. All right, we're going to start with part A. Part A is representing these three bones, or this structure, which consists of three bones. These bones are the smallest bones found in the human skeleton. All right, and they're found in the ear, right? So these bones are referred to as ossicles. They are called ossicles. All right, next we're going to look at part B. Part B is referring to this whole structure. All right, so this whole structure, as you can see, consists of structures that look like semicircles. So it is known as the semicircular canals. Semicircular canals. All right, so semicircular canals. Let me just put an eye there. Right, semicircular canals. Right, we move on to part C. Part C for me is a funny one because of its structure. For me it looks like a snail. Right, so this part is known as the cochlea. All right, so that's the cochlea. Right, we move on to part D. Part D is this whole structure. As you can see, the structure is forming a tube. So it is a tube. We just give it some color so that it's easier for us to see and also remember, when it comes to the exam. Right, then we move on. So this part, it is known as the Eustachian tube. So we're just gonna write Eustachian tube. Right, it's D. Right, so I'm just gonna drop the label this way so that it's clear there. Eustachian tube. Then we move on to E. E is this little part. All right, it is circular in shape, or you can say it is round. Right, so this one is called the round window. All right, so the round window, our E is the round window. So I'm just gonna drop it a bit and bring it this side and write here round window. Window like the windows that we have in our houses. Right, So from E, we're going to move on to F. And F, let's use red because it's colored in black. Right? It is this part that is connected to the ossicles there. So this part is called the tympanium membrane. Sometimes it is not tympanium membrane, the tympanic membrane or the tympanium. So it is known as the tympanium or the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. So our F, which is this F, I'm just going to put it this way. So it is the tympanic membrane. Tympanic membrane or the tympanium. All right, tympanic membrane or the eardrum. Right? So we have labeled our diagram. That's the way we study the diagram. So the next thing that we're going to do is to try and address the question. But before we dive into addressing the question or answering the questions, it is standard procedure that every candidate should be in a position to answer the questions. And for you to be in a position to answer the questions, you must read. Make sure you read and you understand the questions, so you understand the requirements of the questions. And these requirements of the questions are the instructions that the examiner is giving you. They will also show you what the examiner is expecting from you. So my advice would be, highlight, write something, highlight or write something. When you highlight, the questions, whatever you're going to highlight there is going to stand out. So you're highlighting the keywords, in the questions so that they stand out and they constantly remind you of what the examiner is expecting from you. And by so doing, you won't forget what the examiner is asking you to do. All right, so we're going to start with question 4.1. It is asking you to identify. All right, so what are you identifying? You are identifying part B and part E. So if you look at this question, you see that you are simply asked to identify one thing in each question. And also you consider the mark allocation, right? You look at the mark allocation for each question here, it is 1 mark. And that tells you that, or it highlights or it emphasizes that the examiner is only expecting one thing. Don't write more than one thing here because you'll simply be wasting time and you may not finish your exam. All right, then move on to question 4.2. 4.2 is asking you to just give. All right, you are just giving. All right, you are stating the letter. That's one. You are also stating or giving the name. So it's 2 things that you are giving. 2 things. You are giving 2 things in this question. So 2 things in this question. Let me use red. All right, you are giving 2 things in this question. And these 2 things you are giving, okay, we are simply giving 2 things in this question. All right, and also you look at the mark allocation, you will see that each question is allocated 2 marks. Guys, this is where the life sciences examinations can become tricky, right? Where you would find out that the learner is very happy after the exam. They come out, they're happy, and they're like, I killed the exam, right? And then you'll be surprised when the results come. It is actually the learner that was killed by the exam. It is because the learners were not following the instructions. They don't lose marks here because they don't know. No, doesn't mean that they don't know the answers for this question. They know the answers, but the problem is that they just didn't follow the instructions. And that is why we are emphasizing on this thing, guys, so that you are equipped and you are capacitated to answer such questions. All right, so we move on to question 1.4.3. This one is also asking you to give, but this time you are just giving the letter. So you are only giving one thing here. All right, so one thing, and it's just the letter, guys, not the name. Right, some learners would write the name. If you write the name, the examiner will not be lenient with you. They won't credit you for that, even if the name is correct. So make sure that you follow instructions. The examiner requires the letter only in this in this question. And if you are to look at the mark allocation, is 1 mark for each question, and that guides you in terms of how much information you are going to give for that particular question. Guys, let us look at the verbs that are used in each of these 3 questions in question 1.4. You will find we see that we are being asked to identify, we are being asked to give, and we are also being asked to give. And these verbs suggest that the examiner is just asking you for knowledge. And this is an easy question. All right, this is the easiest question that you can ever get in the exam, where you are being asked to identify and to give. All right, so it's an easy question. I classify it as an easy question that I expect everybody to be in a position to answer correctly and and get 8 out of 8. All right, so now having looked at those tips, let us move on to the next step, which is answering the questions. So we're going to answer these questions in blue because you guys are expected to write your answers using a blue pen. So we start with question 1.4.1. So question 1, okay, let's use a thinner pencil. All right, so it's blue. 1.4.1. 1.4.1 is asking us to identify B. So part A is asking us to identify part B on the diagram. So part B, right? Part B, we go back to the diagram. We see that part B is representing the semicircular canal. I mean circling the name only because the examiner wants you to provide the name, right? So it's semicircular canals. So we write semicircular canals. Right? Then part B of the same question is asking us to identify E. And E, we go back to the diagram. E is this part, the round window. So we just say E is round window. As simple as that. Right, as you can see, I'm not repeating the question. I'm simply writing the answer. And that's what you need to do so that you are not caught in the trap of not finishing the exam. Because when you copy the question, you are simply wasting time. Right? We move on to question 1.4.2, part A. 1.4.2, part A is asking for a letter and a name, right, of that part that is filled with A. All right, the part that is filled with A, right, is the Eustachian tube. So it's this whole thing, the name, and also we need the letter. Remember, it's saying letter, and we start with the letter. So we're going to say it's part G, right, which is the Eustachian tube. Okay, we move on to part B of the same question. Right, part B is asking for the part that contains the organ of Corti. The part that contains the organ of Corti, right, in terms of letter is C, and name is the cochlea. All right, so we go to our answer and we say C, right, and then we write cochlea. All right, so we're done with question 1.4.2. We move on to question 1.4.3, part A. Right here, we just need to write the letter. Write the letter of the part, right, where grommets are inserted. Guys, before we answer this question, let us just discuss what grommets are. So grommets are tiny or plastic tubes that are actually inserted into the tympanic membrane, right, which is our eardrum, right, and they're actually they're inserted there for treating, or they are used for treating middle ear infections. And how do they treat these middle ear infections? They actually do so by equalizing the air pressure that is found between the middle ear and the outside environment. All right. Secondly, they do so by draining out fluid that would be found in the ear, and this fluid can be mucus or it can be pus. So what the grommets do is that they drain out this liquid so that air can be equalized between the middle ear and the outside environment, so that our eardrum or our tympanic membrane does not burst, right? So those are the grommets, right? So where are they inserted? They are inserted in the tympanic membrane. All right, tympanic membrane, we've already identified it, and it is this one, but they want the letter. All right, so they want the letter, so we're going to write the letter only, which is F. We move on to question B. It's asking us for that part of the ear that would amplify the vibrations, right? And that part of the ear that amplifies the vibrations, are the ossicles, all right? And the letter representing the ossicles is A, so we also write A there. All right, so we're done answering the questions. But let us look at how, the markers would mark this question at the end of the year. Let's say you get the same question and you answer it this way. Let's see how the examiner is going to mark, or the marker is going to mark your answers. All right. So question 1.4.1, part A was asking for part B on the diagram, and part B is representing the semicircular canals. So our tick would be on the semicircular canals, right? And part B of the question is asking for part E on the diagram, which is representing the round window, and the mark is on round window, and this question is worth 2 marks. All right, we move on to question 1.4.2. 1.4.2, remember, it is the one that requires 2 things, the letter and the name, and the part that's filled with A is the Eustachian tube, and the letter is D. So we tick D, and we also credit Eustachian tube. We move on to B, the one that contains the organ of T, its letter and name. So we also we credit the letter and we also credit the name. So the letter is C and the name is cochlea. And this question is out of 4 marks. All right, we move on to question 1.4.3. 1.4.3 is asking for the letter, and the letter where grommets are inserted is actually F. F, which is representing the tympanic membrane. So we credit F here. If somebody writes the name tympanic membrane, they lose marks, right? So move on to question B, which is asking for the part that amplifies vibrations, and those are our smallest bones, the ossicles, right, represented by letter A. We credit the letter. If someone was to write ossicles there, they would lose the marks. They would lose the marks nicely there. Okay, nicely, because they wouldn't have followed the instructions. Right. There you have it. The ear. Right? And how to answer the questions, as well as the examination tips that you need for answering such a question. And guys, like I said before, this is an easy question where I would expect everybody to get 8 marks, which is the total marks here. So if you liked, if you enjoyed this video, or if this video was helpful to you, give it a like, share it with your colleagues, right? Also, comment below, maybe telling me the challenges that you are facing with the human ear. And don't forget to subscribe. See you all in the next video. Bye.